because petroleum was so malodorous that everyone was sure that it was a powerful medicine. Now, an odor is a strong smell, but something that's malodorous is a bad, strong smell. So it's a very malodorous substance, and in fact, as we will hear in a moment, its smell limited its marketability as a lubricant. It smelled so bad people wouldn't use it to lubricate things. But somebody found out how to make it not smell. To advertise his medicine, Kyer distributed handbills, banknotes, that bore on the top the picture of an artesian well. Beneath it, in bold letters, was Bank of Allegheny River. And below that, on this ingenious advertisement, from which Madison Avenue could learn today, where one would expect dollars, bottom of the bill you would expect it to say dollars, were the word 400 feet instead of $5 or whatever. 400 feet. And then, quote, below the Earth's surface is pumped up with the salt water, floats on top. Now get hit. This is his advertisement. He hands out these little handbills that are the size of $1 or whatever. They look like currency. You read it and it says on there, quote, 400 feet below the Earth's surface is pumped up with the salt water, floats on top, when a quantity accumulates, is drawn off into barrels, is bottled in its natural state without any preparation or admixture, end quote. So it's just saying what their oil is. It says, this comes up out naturally with salt water, we bottle it, here it is. We don't do anything, no admixture, nothing, natural state. Now, and that's the end of the advertisement, continuing the quote. Thus, Kyer made a virtue of the fact that he did nothing to the petroleum in its raw state but bottle it and sell it. So he made that a virtue. Now then, there's a graduate of Dartmouth College, Mr. George H. Bissell, who had spent 10 frustrating years in various pursuits and finally settled on the law. Now he decides to go back into law, and he's returned on a visit to his alma mater. While he's there, a professor of chemistry showed him a bottle of petroleum and told him that it might be better than coal oil as an illuminant. Where did it come from? Bissell asked. It had been discovered floating on the surfaces of springs in a place called Oil Creek in Pennsylvania, and had been sent by an alumnus, Francis Brewer, whose father was part owner of the land. So Bissell was very deeply interested, and with his law partner, Jonathan Eveleth, he bought 105 acres at Tutsville for $5,000. Now they organized the Pennsylvania Rock Oil Company. They later reorganized it in New York, and I think they ended up moving it to New Jersey later, but whichever. Several barrels of oil were shipped to Professor Benjamin Silliman of Yale, whose father, by coincidence, had made a scientific report on the oil springs at Cuba, New York, in 1833. By fractional distillation, Professor Silliman showed that at least 50% could be converted into illuminating oil that could be burned in a camphene lamp, C-A-M-P-H-E-N-E, camphene lamp, and that in addition, naphtha, N-A-P-H-T-H-A, and paraffin, P-A-R-A-F-F-I-N, could be recovered, leaving only a 10% residue. So this professor says 90% of this can be used as marketable. Here's the procedures to do it. As to the lubricating oils, he was vague. About the illuminant, he was enthusiastic. Quote, I cannot refrain from expressing my satisfaction at the result of these photometric experiments, since they have given the oil of your company a much higher value as an illuminant than I had dared to hope. In conclusion, he stated his belief that the company had a raw material from which, by simple and not expensive process, they might manufacture very valuable products. End quote. This historic report, this is a historic document, you see, was held up until the company could raise $528 to pay the professor for his troubles. That's a lump of money in those days. So I've got a good report for you. I've got my opinion, but I'm not giving it to you until you pay me $528. The report was printed and distributed as an encouragement to would-be investors. Professor Silliman himself was so impressed that he bought shares in the oil company. So he put his money where his mouth was. But the company was no more successful than before in raising money. The Pennsylvania Rock Oil Company was almost at a standstill, and then came the breakthrough. The story is that while Bissell was walking along Broadway in the summer of 1856, he took refuge from the heat under the awning of a drugstore. While he was inspecting the window, his eyes alighted on a Kyer medicine handbill with its picture of an artesian well. Eureka! Why not drill for oil directly? Synthesis of knowledge from a little handbill in the window. Why not drill for it directly, just as Kyer and others drilled for salt water? He spoke to Townsend about it, who mulled it over, but did not agree with Bissell until the fall of 1857. Then, according to Townsend's account, the stockholders cast scorn on the idea. Oil coming out of the ground, pumping oil out of the earth as one might pump water, what a crazy idea. They thought that was ridiculous. But Townsend had made up his mind. He decided to send to Titusville a fellow boarder at the Tontine Hotel in New Haven. So now the Seneca Oil Company was organized, supplanting a previous company. In May of 1858, a gentleman named Drake, Edwin L. Drake, came to Titusville to stay. He was accompanied by his new wife and his son. For a while he seems to have puttered around digging ditches and pits, but he was here to start the company, you see. Perhaps he had some doubts about drilling for oil. It was not until the late summer that he set about to find a driller. One agreed to come, but did not show up. It appeared that he thought Drake was unbalanced, and the driller had said yes only to get rid of him. So not too many people were interested. They thought this was wacky. Another driller vanished after he got a better offer from a salt borer. There was one delay after another in assembling tools. Drake was a methodical plodder, not a dynamo of energy, and when cold weather set in, all he had to show was a 30-foot derrick and an engine house. So this is the first drilling operation trying to get started. The inhabitants of the area, who were at first amused by the project, soon dismissed it with indifference. What deterred them was probably doubt as to whether there were formations of oil at all. The residents of the oil areas were unanimously convinced that there were no such formations, and that the oil was from underground coal fields that oozed to the surface by a kind of capillary action. Even if there were such formations, might they not be thousands of feet below the surface? Now the answer, of course, is this is Pennsylvania's coal country, so they were like this is just from coal. It just oozes up from coal. The answer is yeah, there were formations thousands of feet below the surface, but not all of them were thousands of feet down. So they finally start to drill. When the well was 18 feet deep, the soil caved in. The cast iron pipe, 6-inch square, was then driven down. Now they drilled it to 70 feet, and they thought they were going to have to drill further. The next day, Smith and his son looked into the well, and his son saw dark liquid at the foot, beneath the surface of the shaft. It was oil. They had hit oil, 70 feet. Running to a neighboring sawmill, he cried, "We've struck oil!" The cry reverberated through the countryside. "The Yankee has struck oil! The Yankee has struck oil!" Within 24 hours, hundreds were milling around the well. Oil did not have the same sound as gold, but within a few months of the Drake strike, a wave of new faces was to be seen in the Oil Creek area. Unlike the gold rush of 1849, a continent did not have to be traversed. This strike was close to the eastern centers of population, and only 20 miles from the nearest railroad. Workmen in the salt drilling industry came early, leaving that industry prostrate. So it's a good thing we had the expertise. We actually had people who knew how to drill, deep holes. Those who had been frustrated in the California gold rush came to try their luck with oil. Farm boys from 100 miles around flocked in, lured by tales of fancy pay for teamstering oil. Speculators and investors came in. Said a gentleman in the 1860s, "It is now the rendezvous of strangers eager for speculation."